You're watching news at Prime. Good to have you with us. We start with this. There's been mixed reaction to Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's budget. Godongwana is adamant that it's not an austerity budget, but fuel levies will be raised. Let's get a sense now of what really took place in Cape Town. And my colleague Aldrin Sampear is going to sum the day for us, and he joins us live from the venue of this particular speech. Aldrin, good evening to you. Fuel levies going up for the first time, at least in the past 3 years. How did that go down with observers, and are they confident that indeed, as the Finance Minister puts it, this is not an austerity budget?
Well, depending on who you speak to, Koli, some would argue and say that actually this is an austerity budget, even though the minister has emphasized this particular point, that when it comes to the budget spend itself, that the budget spend and the expenditure that has been announced as well, that particular expenditure will not be impacted by some of the decisions that have been taken here, considering that you have the VAT hike that has not been included, which has also been received with a loud applause. But remember that went all the way through a court process with an out-of-court settlement as well. But here is the thing, that even though you don't have a VAT increase, but you do have a fuel levy increase, 16 cents per litre of petrol and 15 cents per litre of diesel. And that comes into effect next month, on the 4th of June. That's when we will see the fuel levy increase. I spoke to Alex Mashilo a bit earlier on. He's the South African Communist Party spokesperson, and he says that essentially what this also means is that for every single person, the cost of living will be increasing. But it will have a major impact, especially on the poorest of the poor. And what we will be seeing is a taxi fare increase, as an example. And just look at the goods and services, that where you find the petrol being used, that means that goods and services will also see an increase that is going to impact you and I as well. But listen to what the Democratic Alliance's spokesperson, Karabo Kakao, had to say about this budget that has been delivered by the Minister of Finance.
The Democratic Alliance welcomes the budget speech with caution, of course. We're very delighted that part of what the Democratic Alliance has been calling for as far as infrastructure investment is concerned is on the table. We're happy to see that 1 trillion there, because what's important here is to ensure that our economy grows, that there's enough expansion to protect the current set of jobs, to expand for more job opportunities, to ensure that more and more South Africans are able to put food on the table for themselves and their families, with the ultimate goal of alleviating poverty. So we're very happy that we're able to see infrastructure investment in the form of road network, a rail network, in the form of water and building management, because those are at the heart of what grows the economy. But the second thing that we're mostly happy to see in the tabulation is the cutting down on wasteful expenditure, because we've maintained as the Democratic Alliance that we do not have a revenue collection problem, we have an expenditure.
Karabo Kakao there, who is the spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance, on what their take is on what the minister had announced earlier on today. There was also the announcement of the trillion rand that will be spent on infrastructure, which is obviously quite important, because this speaks to that construction side that the Democratic Alliance have been emphasizing on, which will of course also lead to job creation. But listen to what Bosa's leader, Musi Mamani, had to say about this budget that has been announced and proposed.
Well, I think the good things about this budget is that the minister's expenditure are relatively the same. We've avoided a tax hike, and I think next year in the medium term we will have a budget that's well balanced. I don't like the fact that we've got low growth, we're not reforming anything, and ultimately the ugly part of it is that actually we'll spend more in debt than we will on any other service in the country. And that, for me, is a state of an economy that's not growing fast enough, that's not creating jobs, and ultimately what is going to happen is that until we make tough decisions about how do we reform our economy, South Africa will continue to linger in the bottom end with high levels of unemployment and poor economic growth outcomes.
Yeah, and the Minister of Finance saying that there needs to be some changes, especially when we look at that debt to GDP ratio, indicating that currently for the 2025-2026 financial year alone, we are spending around 1.2 billion rand per day. But listen to what the official opposition, the Mondoi political party, had to say about the minister's proposals.
Well, if shifting the deck chairs on the Titanic was a person, this is what we saw today. The big problem in South Africa today is unemployment, it's inequality, it's poverty. Tonight, there is a father who will go home and say to his children, there's no food. Tomorrow, children will go to school without food. A child will leave a home tomorrow, a 10-year-old child, to go and fend for themselves because there's no food in the house. And yet, what the minister did today was just shift the deck chairs. The speech that we had today, we've had it so many times over the last 30 years. Exactly the same things. Fuel levy this, 1% VAT here, and so on. And no decisive, bold interventions to deal with poverty, unemployment, and equality. We need a total paradigm shift. We need to design plans. We need to come up with bold policy moves.
Well, clearly tomorrow, Momentum is going to have a post-budget breakfast. And I think when we attend that post-budget breakfast, one of the important questions for me is also going to be on this particular issue around whether or not we're going to have this national dialogue that had been mooted even before the elections last year, because the Minister of Finance in his budget today is saying that there has been no budget that has been allocated for that national social dialogue. So what does this mean for that particular dialogue, which the President has said is important? The other thing, of course, is also the SRD grant, saying that March 2026, that's when it will come to an end. There are some proposals that they are making there, which amongst others includes a job seekers fund. What does the job seekers fund look like? And we know with the SRD grant, one of the criteria that they have is that you must just be unemployed. Well, when you have a job seekers fund, what will the criteria be there? And would this mean that for anyone else who's unemployed, there will be no money that they will be getting from the state? It's back to you, Kholi.
Aldrin Sampear, thank you very much indeed for giving us that comprehensive summation of the budget speech.